Alright, we are in section 4.1, congruent figures. Alright, so let's look at the got it. You're working on a puzzle. You've almost finished, except for a few pieces of the sky. Place the remaining pieces in the puzzle. How did you figure out where to put the pieces? So how do you know that piece fits there, that piece fits there? So it's all falling back on congruency. Alright, so congruent polygons have congruent corresponding parts. So let's look at problem 1. If HIJK is congruent to LMNO, what are the corresponding congruent parts? Alright, so the sides. Let's look at the sides first. HI is congruent to LM. IJ is congruent to MN. JK is congruent to NO. And KH is congruent to OL. So you have to look at how they're rotated. And now the angles have to match. Not only do the sides, but also the angles. So angle H corresponds to angle L, angle I corresponds to angle M, angle J corresponds to angle N, angle K corresponds to angle O. So, alright, so don't do the got it for that one, but let's look at problem 2. The wings of SR-71 Blackbird aircraft suggest congruent triangles. What's the measure of angle D? So you can see that angle D corresponds to angle A. But first we gotta find angle A. So this is what we're gonna do. Since measure A is equal to measure D, and this is a triangle, triangles that have 180. So measure A plus 30 plus 75 equals 180. So therefore, measure of angle A plus 105 equals 180. So the measure of angle A is 75 degrees. So therefore, since measure A equals measure D, measure angle D also equals 75 degrees. Alright, so try to got it for this one. Alright, problem 3. Okay. Problem 3 is looking at these two triangles and are they congruent? Now remember, in order for congruency, all sides need to be equal. All sides need to be equal to each other. Like these sides need to be equal to those sides, and then the angles, the corresponding angles, have to be equal. All right. So first, let me see if you can get the picture on the side. All right. Angle B is congruent to side B, AB is congruent to angle ED because it's given. BC is also congruent to DC because BC equals 4 and DC also equals 4. Similarly, we can also say that AC is congruent to CE because AC equals 6 and so does EC. So now, those are all the sides. We got the sides done. Now we want the angles. So, angle A is congruent to angle E, and angle B is congruent to angle D, because that's also given. So now, we know that angle BCA is congruent to angle ECD because of vertical angles. So therefore, we're done. We just justified that these two angles are in fact congruent. Alright, so now let's look at this theorem really quickly. Alright, this is the third angle theorem. So it's saying if you're given that these two angles are congruent and these two angles are congruent, then therefore these two are congruent. So let us look at, alright, so you are given that LM LM is congruent to LO. Alright, so these two sides. MN is congruent to ON. Angle M is congruent to angle O, and angle MLN is congruent to angle OLN. So we want to prove these two triangles are congruent. So remember, we got two sides and two angles. So now we have to prove that this side is congruent to itself, and these two angles are congruent to each other. So let's start off with the statement. LM and M and LO are congruent to each other, and MN and ON are congruent to each other because of the given. Always start with the given. Next, we want to prove that this side is congruent. LN is congruent to itself because of the reflexive property. And now we want to go to the angles. These two angles are congruent, and these two angles are congruent because we're given that. And now, because of the third angle theorem, these two angles are congruent. If this angle is congruent to this angle is congruent to that angle. By definition, these two angles must be congruent to each other. So therefore, now that we prove that, this triangle and this triangle are congruent to each other. So, why don't you try this got it right here. Let me get a little bit closer. Alright, now that you can see it.